I work with companies at the cutting edge of emerging markets, including blockchain, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, commercial space. I believe that XRP is quite revolutionary in its approach. I think that the companies that are building on XRP have identified it as a platform which is superior in many ways to its competitors. It's quite amazing to see all of the confluence of these different technologies coming together, unlock new capabilities and mission opportunities. The intersectionality of blockchain with other emerging technologies like artificial intelligence will fundamentally transform society. The society of the future will be unrecognizable to those of us at present. We are on the path of that singularity. And I believe that with that comes legal clarity. I think that the efficiencies that XRP can yield are advantageous. It has various different qualities which are superior to, in many ways, the industry standards at this point. I believe it's very disruptive.
Hey, what's going on, family and friends? Welcome back to the channel. Today, I'm excited to bring you a virtual sit-down with one of the sharpest legal minds in the game, James Anthony Wolff. James is the chair of the Emerging Technologies Law Group at Warshaw Berstein, a contributor to over 20 startups, and co-author of the very first crypto legislation in U.S. history. James is deeply embedded in the worlds of blockchain, AI, DeFi, and even space law. In this interview, we cover everything from the legal blind spots that most Web3 founders miss to how blockchain and AI will intersect with human rights, and yes, even how tokenization may power orbital salvage missions in space. I even shoot my shot and ask James what he thinks about my favorite digital asset, XRP, and let's just say he's bullish. This conversation is loaded with insights for anyone interested in the tokenization movement or building for our future and a better tomorrow. So let's roll that interview. Thanks for tuning in. Love you mucho. Hey, what's going on, family and friends? We're back with another exclusive interview. Today, I'm joined by an acclaimed professional, an attorney that I believe will bring great value to my community. His name is James Wolff. Let's bring him up onto the stage. James, how you doing today, sir?
Great. How are you? Good to see everyone.
It's good to be seen. And on behalf of my community, we're excited to have you here. But before we begin, let's begin with a well-deserved or much-deserved introduction. James Wolff is a seasoned executive, entrepreneur, and corporate transactional attorney with a track record of driving growth across emerging tech, mid-market businesses, and law firms. He's the chair of Emerging Technologies Law Group at Warshaw Berstein, where he's co-founded or contributed to countless startups. James sits on the board of various organizations, including the United Nations Association and New York Bar. He's a gentleman with deep experience in mergers and acquisitions and IP strategies. He also wrote and contributed to the first ever crypto legislation here in the US way back in 2013. So he's been in this sector for quite some time. And during James' off hours, you can find him composing classical music, releasing numerous classical and modern productions. Thanks for joining me today, James. How you doing?
Doing great. How are you doing, Rick?
We're going to talk about some very interesting topics of conversation. You participated in the first ever crypto legislation here in the US. We've got the Genius Act going on. Let's talk about this. What type of involvement did you have with this initiative?
Yes, in 2013, I co-authored the Cryptocurrency Moratorium Act. It was sponsored by then Congressional Representative Stephen Stockman. It was an early entrant into federal policy, or lack thereof, if you will. And it was an educational opportunity to learn how to approach policy writing and digital assets.
For those in the audience who are unfamiliar with who you are, how about you give a quick pitch on your accomplishments and who you are as a professional?
Sure, Ray. Hello, everyone. My name is James Wolff. I am the chair of the Emerging Technologies Law Group at Warshaw Berstein here in New York City. I represent a portfolio of emerging tech companies across the corporate lifecycle, from formations through operations and exits. I work with companies at the cutting edge of emerging markets, including blockchain, artificial intelligence, 3D printing, commercial space, and likewise. Companies that I represent are regularly in the news cycle for various different Space Force or government funding awards. And I really enjoy working with companies that are creating precedents, not only in their markets, but globally, companies that are changing and disrupting the industry and building the future.
This conversation can go many directions, but for those in the audience, we'll keep it narrow. We'll talk about how to navigate the intricacies of these verticals. And again, so thank you for sharing your time with me, James.
Thank you for having me. It's terrific to be here.
Absolutely. Now, before we begin, I'm familiar, James, you're an acclaimed musician. So I'm assuming you're very left brained, but as an attorney, you're very right brained as well. What inspired you to not just only be an attorney, but an extremely decorated and acclaimed attorney based in New York?
I suppose that law offered me the most impactful tool set to be able to assist and work with companies. I wanted to move from pure creation per se to more of shaping how innovation functions at scale, working with emerging technologies to develop and deploy them. And I suppose music had helped me in training me in the discipline that was necessary to focus, the complexity, systems building, skills that I found that were directly translatable to legal work. But at the same time, I found it cathartic in context to the stressful, inherently stressful nature of corporate practice.
Yeah, yeah. What consistent legal or strategic blind spots do you see most early stage founders struggling with, particularly in this Web3 ecosystem?
There are some common elements that I do see. Sometimes founders, or I'd say more than sometimes, but in my practice, I find that founders often delay IP and governance documentation. And I think that creates significant downstream risks. Many mistakenly believe that decentralization eliminates legal exposure, but it really doesn't. Deferring legal structuring until funding arrives is really it's backwards. Solid legal scaffolding attracts capital. It supplements investor confidence around a company, and especially in high barriers with respect to barriers to the entry.
Well, James, appreciate you sharing that little tidbit of information. For those in the audience, I'd like to let them know how we actually first came to know and cross paths. We met in New York. This was right around the time when I went out to go as media and support with the Tokenize This conference, a very prestigious conference at the Glass House, and it hosted the likes of Stellar, Ripple-backed fintechs like Zonix, who've already tokenized $5 billion in assets, and individuals like Boon Bergsma, the founder and CEO of Web3 Industries, W3 SaaS, who I work closely with as well. And Boon is I just say he's a wonderful human being. And so a friend of Boon's is a friend of mine, and I'm excited to have you on this interview. Actually, how did you come to know Boon, with that being said, James?
That is a good question. It was some time ago, many years ago. Was I represented him as general counsel for one of his blockchain laboratories ventures.
Oh, okay, that makes sense. Yeah, because Boone is supporting me with one of my businesses that is built on the XRP ledger. And Boone, I would like to describe him as even a funnel to Ripple. Is, and what I mean by that is, if you have an idea and it's blockchain based and you want to take it onto the XRP ledger, Boone is a wonderful human being or wonderful developer to discuss those endeavors with, because he's very experienced building on the XRP ledger, and also somebody that's well connected just because he gets along with everybody. The whole developer community at Ripple just loves Boone. What are your thoughts about XRP and the XRP ledger? One that I'm wearing on my hat right now.
Yes. Without being able to endorse and remaining agnostic at all times, I believe that XRP is quite revolutionary in its approach. I think that the companies that are building on XRP have identified it as a platform which is superior in many ways to its competitors. I think that the efficiencies that XRP can yield are advantageous. It has various different qualities which are superior to, in many ways, the industry standards at this point. I believe it's very disruptive. XRP is certainly, in my mind, a terrific example of decentralization of the blockchain protocol. Being able to operate without proof of work or mining and using its unique consensus algorithm, I think allows it advantages over current market competitors. Obviously, transaction speed is necessary for large scale adoption across a multitude of retail systems, and likewise, I think that its throughput and its energy efficiency position it for adoption and the ability to become a utility scale operation. There are, by day, more and more people discovering digital assets XRP, and that the general exposure is growing. And the approach that XRP is taking is the right approach. I can't say with any certainty or company agnostic, right, to that extent, but I do believe that you have identified something that is truly unique and extraordinary. And I'm excited to be part of that community. And I believe that it has a great future ahead of it.
Yeah. So with that being said, given your work, both government aligned and in the private sector, how do you envision the future balance of centralization or centralized regulation versus decentralized innovation?
I think we're heading towards hybrid models where we will see enforcement by governments and operation by autonomous systems. I think the goal is eventual interoperability, where we'd be bridging legal frameworks with algorithmic governance.
Mhm.
And and for that reason, I think that modular regulation is going to be crucial. Flexible, scalable, and jurisdiction neutral laws, uh, which will allow the industries to scale and to scale accordingly to best corporate governance practices, and also compliance and intertwined considerations such as data privacy and likewise, which are overarching and still impact these companies to the extent that while they're not related to ledger specific considerations, they are still important from an operational liability component standpoint.
We're so liberated by decentralization, but I don't think people are aware of what we're also giving up at the same time with that data privacy, like you mentioned, or the ability for tracking and things of that nature. So there's a give and take. Given your deep experience navigating the legalities of these emerging sectors and technologies, what are your thoughts on the status of the Genius Act, given also with your experience supporting writing crypto legislation as early as 2013? Are we going to see some type of flip of the switch moment, or what kind of impact are we talking about with sound crypto legislation?
I think that we lack a cohesive federal framework that's been replaced to that extent by state legislation, primarily here in New York with the New York Department of Financial Services and likewise. I see this as a watershed moment for the country to allow the risk tolerance necessary to secure larger tranches of capital and to bring that ability to raise capital around stablecoins and framework regulated activities into the public zeitgeist that's going to garner the exposure necessary, and which will inevitably also scale adoption of ledger technologies at the same time.
on that topic, as the chair of emerging technologies law group at Warshaw Berstein, how do you approach advising your clients in these sectors like AI and blockchain, where the legal frameworks are still evolving and not fully adopted yet?
Right. Well, I take a strategic forward-looking approach, preparing for where the law is going, not just where it is. I believe in best governance practices where you structure governance in deal terms from a transactional standpoint to be able to evolve within that framework. I believe that compliance, as framed as a long-term advantage, is a net positive. You're
Mm.
not framing it as a reactive cost center. It is not a reactive cost center, no less. The best companies integrate compliance into their long-term strategy. And I think that that's as ever critical when you're dealing with an industry like fintech, which inherently carries with it a high barrier to entry and a high risk with respect to regulatory uncertainty.
With my investor cap on, I'm thinking about personally where to stack my chips next. That's the game for me. I've been deploying significant amount of capital over these past few years, and so I've always got to think, what's the next Ripple Labs, or what's the next blockchain? And
Yes.
so for me, I do think we're moving towards everything's going digital. It's going to be empowered by AI. And now the new landscape of interest, or the new investment opportunities, may be towards space. And so, given the fact that you are a man that's well informed with these new and emerging technologies geared for space, I believe you're familiar of asteroid mining, the Voyager station, and obviously interstellar missions. Do you think the legal frameworks are still yet to be defined for space? And if so, what do you think space law looks like looking into the future, maybe 2030?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think by 2030, space law will need to have evolved into a layered system with international norms for security and private contracting for operations, ownership, and liability. We are well on our way there, but I believe that decentralized legal tools like registries, smart contracts, and verifiable claims would also play a key role in how those space activities are coordinated and enforced. If you again look at the parallel as to blockchain, it's advanced faster than space law, largely because again it has had no treaties to undo or otherwise modify or nullify. But but they both face those same core issues: cross-border jurisdiction and considerations as to liability, and likewise. Another component of the commercial space industry is orbital salvage and debris. And there's also parallels there to blockchain. You can see that orbital debris retrieval raises various fundamental questions around ownership and jurisdiction and salvage rights, but none of them are clearly resolved under current treaties or by fiat direction of any particular sovereign. Blockchains may offer a solution there: timestamp proofs of retrieval, decentralized salvage registries, tokenized incentives for cleanup missions. I believe that could provide legal clarity and on the liability involved and those rewards which are essential for commercial engagement in orbital maintenance alone. I mean, the Kessler effect and that potential for catastrophic impacts in orbit no less demand it. And I believe that slowly but surely we are building the legal architecture to support that. Part of my work, for example, on the board of the National Space Society and the international committee there has been looking at those legal architectures. And I'm hosting and moderating a panel on that next week at the International Space Development Conference. And that is, interestingly enough, one of the topics. And so it's always so fascinating to see these parallels in the intersectionality of various different emerging markets or emerging technologies, whether it's blockchain or whether it's commercial space applications, and the and that intersectionality. It's quite amazing to see all of the confluence of these different technologies coming together, unlock new capabilities and mission opportunities.
While you're saying this, it's great to see space debris removal or cleanup. But what about our oceans? There's a bunch of plastics and things like that. I'd love to see maybe some of that cleanup happening right here. Maybe some incentivization for those companies to do that in our own oceans. Do you think that there's a time and place for that?
Yes, I think that in parallel, many of these capitalized blockchain companies, whether it's DeFi or smart contract or exchange-based institutions, they have the capacity to invest in goodwill projects, and likewise that don't necessarily have an immediate stakeholder ROI or impact, but I believe that's just good governance,
Yeah.
that the owners and founders of these companies can wield their wealth and their empires for good. And that's something that I believe is truly noble. Lacking the ability of sovereigns to do something similar, it does fall on the private markets. Well, maybe one great example then to share is XPRIZE and the work that XPRIZE is doing with their related prize purses and their programmatic funding of various different emerging technologies such as carbon removal. That's a great example, and how they've built the carbon removal market. There was an incredible prize purse that was announced recently at the New York Stock Exchange, where the first prize winner was awarded $50 million for their carbon sequestration technology. I believe that these institutions are able to address some of the largest problems of our time in a way that the capital markets are unable to. They're not directed to this early, near-term stakeholder ROI at all costs approach that otherwise guides the fiat for markets.
What do you see as being unique legal challenges that are emerging because of the intersection of AI and things of like human rights, particularly as mentioned when sitting on the board for the United Nations Association? Is there anything that stands out based on your experience?
Oh, that is quite the packed question.
I mean, there is these concerns that people
Yes.
have their jobs displaced. So what comes to mind, given your expertise?
Well, certainly through my work with the United Nations Association, the New York City Bar, and likewise, I'm advocating for global frameworks that center dignity and due process as both AI and decentralized blockchain systems scale globally. Though I do think that, again, another common motif here, the legal system lags behind the realities of autonomous systems and decentralized systems. I believe we do need new accountability models that extend beyond traditional corporate liability. I don't know what that necessarily would be or what that means. I believe that bias, explainability, and consent, that's not just a technical challenge, that it implicates legal and human rights, which are imperatives that must be built into good design. I believe that there would be a consumer-driven effect for companies through a natural selection process, even if there isn't a legal framework necessarily tied. It becomes an interesting question of cross-borders jurisdiction in many cases, especially with respect to the US companies. If you look at the various different emerging legal frameworks around AI through the EU AI Act and GDPR, which necessarily intertwines data privacy as well. I think that there's a significant overlap between multiple different accountability frameworks that resonate with consumer practices.
Man, there's a lot to be mindful of sitting in your seat, James. So kudos to you, and your clients are fortunate to have you at the helm. Before I do let you go, is there any last or final thoughts that you'd like to leave with those in the audience or hammer home before I do let you go?
Well, I will say in closing that I believe that blockchain offers a global solution to some of the greatest problems of our time. The immutable ledger, the time-stamped approval proof sets, the decentralization of registries, the ability to tokenize. I I think that's the future. And the intersectionality of blockchain with other emerging technologies like artificial intelligence will fundamentally transform society. The society of the future will be unrecognizable to those of us at present, that we are on the path of that singularity. And I believe that with that comes legal clarity on the frameworks, the liability components involved in engaging commercial enterprises to support the advancement of that future.
What a time to be alive, and an exciting conversation with you today. James, I appreciate you sharing your time with me and your expertise. Looking forward to keeping a tab on your success and the impact that you leave behind, not as mentioned for your family, but for uh, everyone around this world. I think it's an exciting time, and again, I'm confident in your success and the legacy that you're going to leave. Uh,
Thank you, Ray. And thank you again for the platform. May
uh,
this be the first of many.
Oh, I gotta have you back on. You'll be my the voice of what's going on from a legal perspective, because I haven't interviewed too many attorneys, but there are many attorneys in this space, and when I do, I always do my best to introduce you guys, because I feel in this world it's best to be supportive. I mean, we're a growing and global community, so it's with our powers combined, there's so much more that we can achieve
I
rather than
truly appreciate that. And it's great to potentially connect with those companies in this space. I am always growing my roster.
Oh, I'll be sure to make those introductions after this call. But James, I'm out of your hair. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and we'll talk soon. Okay.
Terrific. All right.
Thank
Take care.
thank you, sir. All right, love you mucho.